Connecticut's 4th Congressional District. For Connecticut Public, I'm Frankie Graziano. This is The Wheelhouse. It's the show that connects politics to the people. We got your weekly dose of politics in Connecticut and beyond right here. Today we're talking to the candidates for Connecticut's 4th Congressional District. This district covers much of the southwestern portion of the state, including most of Fairfield County, some of New Haven County. We're going to be talking to incumbent Representative Democrat Jim Himes. And later we'll be talking to challengers, including Michael Goldstein, he's a Republican, and independent candidate Benjamin Wesley. Today's show is part of a series of interviews we're doing with political candidates in our state. We're having a lot of fun doing this, talking with all sides, Republicans, Democrats. We got an independent on today's show for some of the key races in Connecticut. Last week, we spoke with candidates for Connecticut's 5th Congressional District. If you want to go back and listen to that one, it featured Congresswoman Jahana Hayes, challenger George Logan. ctpublic.org/The Wheelhouse is the destination for that. All right, let's do our conversation today. And up first, Congressman Jim Himes. Congressman, thank you for coming back to the Wheelhouse.
Good morning, Frankie. Thanks for having me.
Hey, nice to talk to you bright and early in the morning. Nice to see you there. You got a seat in Connecticut's 4th Congressional District since I believe it was 2009 in the Obama elections. Can you share one or two of your biggest accomplishments you feel like you've had so far in your time in office?
Yeah. You know, I'm running because I think I can look back on that time and say we've accomplished a bunch of things, a lot of things actually. But you asked for one for two, so let me give you two, and let me take you back in the Wayback Machine, you know, to 2009, 2010. When we passed the Affordable Care Act. Now, why do I highlight that from so long ago? The answer is it was hugely controversial at the time. My God, I had over a dozen town hall meetings with, people just completely, at odds with each other. But looking back on it now, the Affordable Care Act has provided health insurance literally to tens of millions of Americans and did away with a lot of the toxic stuff from which we barely remember anymore. But, it used to be that if you didn't have a job that offered you insurance and you had a pre-existing condition, you'd had breast cancer, you had diabetes, you weren't getting insurance. And all of that is a thing of the past now because of the passage of the Affordable Care Act, which doesn't mean, by the way, we don't have a long way to go on making our healthcare system more affordable, more accessible. And we can talk more about that if you like, because we have made other progress. But let me highlight, you asked for two, let me highlight another one, which is absolutely essential to the people of southwestern Connecticut. That's the bipartisan infrastructure law. Let me say those first two words again, bipartisan infrastructure. As we talk right now, there are people sitting in traffic on 95 in the Merritt. And this was a problem that grew up over decades, generations, right? And, for years and years and years, the Infrastructure Week, it became a joke, right? But finally, a couple of years ago, and bipartisan was the word, Democratic and Republican support for the biggest investment we've ever made in our infrastructure, which today is rebuilding the Walk Bridge in Norwalk. It's going to help rebuild the bridge over the Byram River in Greenwich. It's rebuilding bridges under and over 95 up and down the district. So if you asked me for just two, I would probably highlight those two.
Congressman Himes, I don't have a lot of time today because there's three of you guys that we're going to speak to, but I'd love to follow up on the Affordable Care Act. Just because, as I'm sure you're always worried about in Congress, you're always worried about Republicans maybe not supporting this. And we heard the former president in a debate sort of stumble a little bit when talking about the ACA and concepts of a plan. Just quickly, do you think like the ACA will survive and maybe prosper in the future?
Yeah, it will survive. And the episode you referred to is, the Republicans and Donald Trump in particular, after years and years and years of trying to end the Affordable Care Act, finally given up because they realized the amount of good that it has done out there. And boy, do they ever realize what would happen if they achieved what they said they were trying to achieve, did away with it, and kicked tens of millions of Americans off their insurance. Man, the reaction to that would be up there with the reaction to the reversal of Roe v. Wade, which they engineered a couple of years ago. It would be pretty brutal, and that's why you saw Trump stumble. He understands that that while we've got a long way to go, the Affordable Care Act in the end really helped a lot of Americans.
Let me give you some numbers on housing in your district. these were published in the Connecticut Mirror, so I'm going to read these. In 2023, the median house sale prices in Fairfield County up about 8% compared to those in 2022, up 55% compared to 2019. Median home sold was $528,000, Congressman, in March of 2024. Median listing home price was $796,000. Out of reach for many people, particularly some of those people in your district. I imagine that this is something that people in your district want you to address and want the federal government to address.
Big time, big time. When you talk to business leaders in Southwestern Connecticut, and Southwestern Connecticut is doing pretty well economically, particularly in places like Stamford and Norwalk, where you see companies moving in. You talk to those business leaders, they'll tell you, I have two problems. Love the quality of life down here, love the schools, love the communities, the traffic, which we just talked about with respect to infrastructure, but housing. The numbers you gave are exactly right. And so what that means is that, younger people who aren't making a ton of money in the private sector yet have a hard time buying a home. Forget about teachers and police officers and firefighters, right? Those folks that aren't in the private sector have a really hard time living in the communities they serve. Here's the hard part, and there's just no way to sugarcoat this, but the federal government doesn't have a lot of tools with which to address the housing problem. At the end of the day, the housing problem is a problem of supply. We just don't have enough housing. Nationwide, those numbers are 4 or 5 million units that we need that we don't have. So what's the answer? The answer is that you get communities to really prioritize, especially those communities that are close to transit, right? Where you're near a train station, you get those communities to prioritize housing. Now, that's not to say that smaller towns can't do a better job, but look at what Stamford's doing right now. If you drive through Stamford, you will see cranes building housing throughout that city. And so the answer is more of that in places like Norwalk and especially Bridgeport, Connecticut, where you've got a lot of land, some of it dirty, by the way, post-industrial land, where we could build a lot of housing and start to ease some of that pressure that you talked about.
You mentioned Bridgeport. We always talk about the income inequality between Bridgeport and some of the rest of the cities in Fairfield County. Earlier this year, investigative reporter Jacqueline Rabe Thomas reported on a study showing that Connecticut's racial and economic segregation among the worst in the country. Study was conducted by a New York City-based group. I believe it was called Urbanomics. Actually, the governor hired these folks. Highest in Fairfield County out of any other county in the state. What plans do you have to help address this issue?
You're right, Frankie, about that. It's something I feel every day. I mean, I'll be in one community, an affluent community like New Canaan or Darien or Greenwich, and then literally 15 minutes later, I'll be in a, desperately poor neighborhood and just a stone's throw away. And it's hard to answer that question quickly, but let me throw out some things that are the answer. Continued economic growth, so that, whether it's a company or a restaurant or a hotel, they are offering those entry-level jobs that might be available to somebody who just graduated high school but doesn't have additional training. So that economic vibrancy is really the strongest thing we can do to give people economic opportunity. And then, and I really want to emphasize this, how does a young person go from that, maybe minimum wage starting job and start climbing the ladder? The answer to that, of course, is education and training. And that's why I want to highlight for you Norwalk Community College and Housatonic Community College, where I've been able to support advanced manufacturing programs to train high school kids, not just college kids, to do things like help build the F-35 jet engine. And so the combination of having a vibrant economy, which we do here in Southwestern Connecticut, with making sure that community colleges, and not just community colleges, but universities, and we've got a bunch of them, Sacred Heart, Fairfield, University of Bridgeport, UConn, are there to provide the training and education that a young person needs to continue climbing that economic ladder.
Glad that you mentioned education. There are some of the highest ranking schools in the state in your district. Schools are also some of the most segregated school districts in the state. And then obviously Darienne's in your district too. They're fighting a little bit some of the science of reading curriculum that's happening locally here in Connecticut. What do you plan to do to at least try to maybe have the federal government step in terms of segregated school districts and issues that they're having with teaching children, maybe in an alliance district like Bridgeport?
Yeah, well, Frankie, first of all, I got to acknowledge that, education in this country is very much under the purview of municipalities and the state. The federal government doesn't have that big a role in telling. And by the way, I think this is good. My daughter was educated, and one of my daughters was educated in the public schools. here in southwestern Connecticut. These are decisions that get made by local school boards and by the state. But we do have, because you highlight this problem, we do have such a dramatic difference between our affluent school districts and our poorer school districts, right? I see this every single day. And, part of that is a challenge associated with the fact that, we don't have county government. We don't have easy ways to move funds into those communities that need extra help because kids are growing up in poverty. The difference between a kid who grows up with a single parent who's working in a low income environment versus one that grows up in an affluent environment, these differences start to show as 2 and 3 year olds, right? So what does that mean? Because we both understand the problem here. And this is a role the federal government can play. Early childhood education, right? So you start with early Head Start and Head Start programs that are making real progress in communities like Bridgeport, where you do have those single parents working. You double down on your commitment to those early years, 2, 3, 4, and 5, when the difference is made. There's a real federal role to make sure we continue to fund those Head Start programs. And then we got to think more, and I can't tell you I know the exact solution here, but we got to think more about supporting families with children with respect to childcare. Why do I say that? Childcare is unaffordable today. And what happens is one of the parents, if there are 2 parents, end up staying home because they don't have options to leave young children in safe and quality childcare. And as a result, not only do you have somebody not getting trained, they're not in the workforce, they're not making income. So that's an area too that I think we can make a lot of progress on.
Congressman Hyams, just about 30 seconds left or so in this interview. So help me. You underscored the word bipartisan earlier. Talk to me about reaching across the aisle, particularly in a polarized House.
Frankie, I every single day aware of the fact that my constituents demand moderation and pragmatism and compromise, which is a little bit of a dirty word. I focus on making sure that our dialogue is civil, and I did emphasize bipartisanship for a reason. Our politics are way too hot, way too angry, frankly, way too dangerous. I was in the chamber on January 6th, and we've got to back away from the rage and the anger and the accusations, or we're not going to have a democracy worthy of the American people.
Congressman Hyams, thank you for coming on the show. Thank you for talking to us. It was great to have you on the Wheelhouse.
Thanks a lot. Great to see you again.
A reminder for listeners, we're talking to candidates for Connecticut's 4th Congressional District this hour. You just heard from Congressman Jim Hyams. Now I'm joined by a challenger, Republican Michael Goldstein. Michael, welcome to the Wheelhouse.
Thank you very much for having me.
So great to talk to you. So great to meet you. There you are. It's good to see you today. Also want to be mentioned that we'll be posing some of the same questions to Mr. Goldstein that we asked Congressman Hyams. Same as well with Benjamin Wesley. It helps our listeners maybe get to know the candidates a little better. Why are you running for a seat in Congress, Michael, and what qualifies you to hold this position?
Sure. So I've been a medical society officer president, got involved in politics through the medical society, through lobbying, advocacy, and a whole bunch of other stuff, and learned for more than a decade how the political system works. 2 years ago, I ran as an unknown in a primary and got 40% of the vote. This time around, I won a primary. I'm running for Congress because I'm somebody that can solve problems. I have a background as both a physician and attorney, and I think that I have a tremendous expertise in our healthcare system, but I realize that our healthcare system is just one of the many problems that this country faces, and I think that we have been through probably the worst administration that we've had in the last 100 years, and our country is heading in the wrong direction, and it needs to be brought back to a much different place than it's heading right now.
I understand that you care very much about health care. I asked this question to Congressman Hyams. I asked him about the Affordable Care Act. Do you think the Affordable Care Act should stick around and maybe even be further supported by the federal government?
I think the Affordable Care Act should stick around till we find something better. I think the problem with the Affordable Care Act includes the fact that it has a high deductible. It doesn't emphasize preventive care nor early intervention, which are two essentials to general health and well-being. When you diagnose diseases early, such as cancer, your chances of success or curing it are much greater. The Affordable Care Act has extremely high deductibles, so middle-class people can't afford to go to the doctor for care, and sometimes they care, they delay their care, and when they show up, it's much too late. Also, there is no emphasis on preventive care, and so those are two major flaws to the Affordable Care Act that need to be addressed with a different kind of health care.
Affordable housing is an issue in your district. I want to break down some numbers for you. These were published in the Connecticut Mirror this past July. 2023 in Fairfield County, median house sale prices up about 8% compared to those in 2022, 55% compared to 2019. March 2024 median sold price was $528,000, $796,000 for the median listing home price. Completely out of reach for many of Connecticut's families. What are your plans to maybe tackle this problem, maybe to get the federal government to tackle it?
Sure. Well, if you look back historically into the post-World War II period, there was the same huge housing shortage because a lot of GIs had come back from the war and were raising families and needed a place to live. And we faced some of the same issues: high land costs, excessive regulation. And what they did is they streamlined the regulation, and they used a mass production of housing with us rather than building houses with basements. They built them on slabs, and they did it in an assembly line fashion. And I think that using prefabs, we can do the same thing of building owned prefabs, provided that we can obtain the land at a reasonable price, or those towns can actually even give or lend or lease the land to individuals. And the other part of that issue is they also streamline the regulations. So if you're building, all your houses within 4 or 5 variations, they should just all be approved, because automatically almost, or through a very streamlined process, so that you can cut the red tape. And I think that it worked extremely well post World War II. I think we should follow that example, and I think it should be owned houses rather than rentals, so that way people can build equity and wealth, which will also reduce wealth disparity.
I want to go over something you had on your website. You're laying out 3 guiding principles for the campaign. One's Take Back Connecticut, Heal This Country, Make America Healthy Again. Can we explore these together? Who are we taking Connecticut back from, and why?
Sure. Well, right now, Connecticut is a one-party state, and as whenever you have a one-party state, you have no checks and balances. So, for example, we have this wonderful public benefit, which is creating a tremendous economic hardship to individuals with their high electric bills. We have the highest taxes, one of the highest taxes in the country. We have stagnant economic growth, and so we need a pro-business attitude, attracting businesses to Connecticut. I think that Connecticut is one of the greatest states in the country. It has everything going for it. It has water, it has natural beauty, it has proximity to New York, it has Yale, it has everything that made Silicon Valley grow and prosper, and yet we're not growing. So our government is doing something wrong, and we need a government that's going to stimulate economic growth and prosperity to this state.
We're asking candidates whether or not they support Donald Trump. You say Make America Healthy Again. Could be a play off of Donald Trump's slogan, Make America Great Again. Do you align yourself with the former president, or do you have any difference in policy, major differences in policy? Kind of help us understand your relationship you might have with the former president and the party at large.
Okay. Well, first of all, I've never personally met Donald Trump, but I am supporting Donald Trump. I think he's a far better alternative than his opponent, and I think that Donald Trump is also somebody that is going to be a much stronger negotiator and much more effective in dealing with our major foreign adversaries, which include China, Iran, and Russia. So I think we need a strong president with a strong foreign policy about negotiating ability, because these people are extremely tough characters, and Donald Trump had to deal with a lot of tough characters in the New York City real estate business, so I think he's going to be much more forceful on that. And I think that reducing the size of our government is essential. I think in healthcare, our healthcare costs have gone up 160% in the last decade. A lot of it is bureaucracy. A lot of it is the consolidation, and I think that our healthcare system we can cut our costs by $1 trillion by getting rid of a lot of the bureaucracy, make it better, make it more available, and achieve the goals of preventive care and early intervention, and increased access for everyone.
Talk to me about your stance on the Israel-Hamas war. If elected to Congress, would you support the United States' continued military aid to Israel?
Absolutely. Israel is our only reliable ally in the Middle East, and they're our best ally in terms of fighting our strongest enemy, which is Iran. Iran is a global terrorist state, and Israel is the best weapon against them in the Middle East. And I think that anybody that doesn't support somebody that wants to fight an enemy on you, is foolish. I think that Israel would do a lot of the heavy lifting in dealing with Iran, and it would take a lot of the burden off of us. I also think that it's the only democracy in the Middle East. It's the only country that also is tolerant of LGBT. It treats women with equality, which is not common in the Middle East. And so it's the closest to us culturally, it's the closest to us politically, and it is also a country that also has co-developed their weapons. A lot of our weapons are modified in Israel and redeveloped in the United States, so we actually derive a lot of benefit from that. So
any solutions that you have to maybe support people in Gaza on the other side to try to make sure that less civilians die?
Well, it's interesting. A lot of that stuff is overstated. Supposedly, 80% of the people that have been killed have not been civilians. 75% of the population of Gaza is committed to the Hamas charter, which calls for the extermination of every single Jew in the state of Israel. So they are, and unless you change the culture, you have a group of people that all they want to do is kill Jews. And of course, they came across the border exactly with that intention. They didn't come to conquer. They didn't come to fight a war. They just came to murder. And so unless you change the culture of people, if people want to exterminate you, and I'm Jewish, then you have to change the culture, or you have to make sure that they can't do it, and you certainly have to destroy the leaders and instigators who are actually initiating those policies. Beyond that, yes.
We only got about a minute left. Thank you for sharing that perspective. I appreciate it. It must be a hard time, particularly for people in the Jewish community. Also a hard time for individuals supporting those in Gaza as well. We're going to talk about this a little later. We have a panel on. But just finally wrapping up here, just help me understand how you could reach across both sides of the aisle here if elected. As you imagine, this is a polarized time in the country.
Well, look, I think everybody wants a better healthcare system, and I think that that's one area that people can be unified on. This general dissatisfaction, and general dissatisfaction affects politicians on both sides of the aisle. So certainly, working with doctors, and there are Democrats and as well. And I've worked with Democrats in New York as a medical society leader, and I do believe that it can be done. I think pick things that people want to solve together and work on them, rather than the things that polarize us.
That was Michael Goldstein, candidate for Congress in Connecticut's 4th Congressional District. Thank you so much for coming on the show. Thank you for doing a little bit of a lightning round with us.
Thank you very much. You can learn more about me on my website, www.goldsteinforcongress.com. Thank you.
That was Michael Goldstein, Republican candidate running for a seat in Connecticut's 4th Congressional District. We also spoke with Congressman Jim Himes, the incumbent candidate for the 4th District. And now we're joined by the independent candidate in the race, Benjamin Wesley. Benjamin, good to have you on today.
Thank you for having me.
Very great to have you on. Hey, tell us more about yourself, Benjamin. Why are you running for a seat in Connecticut's 4th Congressional District?
Sure. My name again. I'm an engineer. I'm basically a layman trying to inject what I think is a different perspective into the race. I work as an engineer, middle class lifestyle, and basically what I'm seeing personally, I want to jump into the race just to give people an opportunity to vote for peace. When I see the platforms from my opponents, Dr. Goldstein and Congressman Himes, I see continuance of sending more money to wars abroad that we don't have money for, and in many cases, it ends up killing civilians, people that we ostensibly want to help. And I think that there's an alternative, and voters deserve a choice if they want to vote for peace, if they want to keep money in their pockets. I think I'm a great alternative.
Can you drill further into that, your stance on some of the various global conflicts that the United States is currently involved in right now?
Sure. So in the case of Ukraine, I think I've said this in multiple interviews. Yes, it is illegal. The war itself is illegal, but to say it's unprovoked I think is a really tough case to make. I mean, you can look at article after article in the New York Times where they're discussing about how we had 13 CIA bases along the Ukraine-Russia front. You can go on YouTube and listen to Victoria Nuland in 2012, where she discusses the coup of the then president Viktor Lukashenko. 2 weeks before, she's discussing who she wants to be the next leaders of Ukraine before he's even deposed, and shortly after that leader is deposed, and the person she wanted to pick is the one in charge. So you can see in the Ukraine conflict, you can see the American hands all over it, and now there's a mess on our hands. There's hundreds of what I believe to be. We can never get an answer out of our security establishment how many have died, but what I believe to be 400,000, 500,000, 600,000 dead Ukrainian men, and I want it to end. And I think the only way this is going to end is through dialogue and negotiation.
What about the Israel-Hamas conflict?
Wow, it's just right to the next one, huh?
Yes.
Well, in terms of
a lot going on, man.
So much going on, right?
The world needs somebody to try to solve these conflicts, right?
Right. Again, I want a healthy and prosperous Israel, but Iran is going to exist in Iran where Israel is not getting new neighbors anytime soon unless the tectonic plates move, and we're going to have to find a way to for these countries to peaceably coexist with each other. We're not going to 20 years ago, Netanyahu came to the United States and said that if we got rid of Saddam Hussein, then we'd have peace in the Middle East. Now, 4,000 soldiers later, hundreds of thousands of Iraqis later, that proved not to be true. And then he came again 3-4 months ago and said, if we go to war with Iran, basically, we're going to be able to get peace in the Middle East. That's, again, fool me once, fool me twice. We know that dog doesn't hunt anymore. So we need to find a way to peaceably negotiate this quickly before, as many experts say, World War III starts up. I
believe that at one point you were a registered Democrat. Is that correct?
I am still a registered
Democrat.
A
registered Democrat. So what ways do you see your politics as different from the Democratic Party? How come you won't run as a Democrat in this case?
Well, I think the Democratic Party has, I consider myself a Dennis Kucinich Democrat. He's actually, I appreciate it. He's actually running again in Ohio for his seat, for his old seat. But if you remember Dennis Kucinich, he was a big fighter for, staying out of the war in Ukraine. I mean, I'm sorry, we got so many wars. Staying out of the war in Iraq. Not going into Libya without our authorization for war, just staying constitutional, staying truthful. If we're going to go to war, we need to deliberate. Congress is one responsible for deliberating this. It seems to me we're sleepwalking into World War III. We're not even going to let Congress decide whether we're at war. We just might find ourselves in a nuclear war without even having a discussion, as is required by the Constitution, as was expected by the founders. This is a very important process. This is something that needs to be discussed. It's not something where we just shovel more weapons and money towards proxy wars. No, you should have a discussion in the Congress and decide, yes, we want to actually go to war and tell the American people why this is critical to our national security.
You're running in the 4th Congressional District. It includes some of the highest achieving schools in the state, but also some of the most segregated school districts in the state. Do you have a plan to address this problem? We often hear that this is more of a state issue with funding, but federal government obviously could intervene.
I don't. As far as the segregation is concerned, I'm up for uplifting all schools. I mean, for me, it's extremely frustrating that I think we're the 30th richest congressional district out of the 530, and we've got the superintendent probably rightly in Bridgeport is asking to close several dilapidated schools. That's to me that's insane. And when you go, when I talk to everyday Connecticut voters, and they say what our priority should be. They say, you know, we need to help the people in Lahaina. We need to help the people in Lahaina, Hawaii. We need to help North Carolina after the hurricane. And we need to help ourselves. The priority for our tax dollars should be improving our own schools. So to the segregation issue, I don't have much to say on that, but I do want all schools to be lifted up. And I think we should be the priority for our own tax dollars.
But in general, I think you're saying don't fund defense as much, don't fund foreign wars, spend more money on the home front. Is that what you're trying to say?
I'm saying that specifically. In fact, you know, in general, we have 800 bases outside the United States. Why? We're not at war. We have the largest, we have the largest defense budget that we've ever had. Why? We're not at war. Again, in the 90s, we had a process where when the Soviet Union was destroyed, we started having a peace dividend. And then obviously the 90s was probably one of the most prosperous times we've had in this country in a long time. So, I would like to bring those dollars home. That doesn't mean I don't want a strong military. I want a military that's here on the home front, keeping us safe, as opposed to being in countries where we're not wanted. The Iraqi parliament said that we should be, has voted multiple times to kick the United States out, and we still have 3 bases there. The Syrian government never invited us in the first place, and we control a third of the country, and we have a large base there. I've asked Jim Himes why we have not left Syria, why he continues to fund those operations, even when the host government does not want us there. Imagine the billions we could save.
Here in Congress, it's a polarized time, as we've mentioned several times on today's show. Will your independent party status help you reach across the aisle and work effectively with people across both parties?
Well,
is that the plan?
Yeah, I mean, for example, I want to advocate. I want to be a congressman that advocates for the people, and I want to be accountable to people. When, for example, during COVID, when the option for a $3,000 check was being tossed around by President Trump, Nancy Pelosi said, no, we're not going to give him that political win before the election. And instead we ended up with an $1,800 check. So $1,200 less. Me, I would have been in the room running to the White House saying, yes, please, I want this $3,000 check because people are hurting. That's the kind of congressman I want to be. So if it means I have to go to the other side of the aisle just to get the things that are needed for my people, I'm going to do it.
I want to button up something you said earlier really quickly while I have you, because we do have just a little bit of time. You talked about the war in Ukraine and about there being a situation where one of the sides was unprovoked. Are you saying that, I don't know if you're maybe, I don't know what the word I'm looking for is here, but are you saying that maybe Russia does have at least some kind of claim to Ukraine?
No, that's not what I'm saying. What
Okay,
I'm saying,
yes.
What I'm saying is, I think in the media, I think the first year of the war, every time someone spoke, it was always a illegal and unprovoked war. Illegal, sure. There's certain provisions for how you can go to illegally, but as far as unprovoked, the United States has been pushing for the
You're
red
blaming
line.
the United States. You're saying that they have more of a role in it.
The red line for for Russia, and we've known this for 20 years. This has been stated by Putin multiple times. This was stated when the Soviet Union broke up, was that they do not want NATO to go. It was basically an inch further from East Germany, but let's not even go there. Just talking 21st century, they didn't want NATO in Ukraine or in Georgia. Today, you can look at the newspapers today. All the foreign policy magazines are still pushing to have NATO.
I get you, but you're saying that we have some kind of role in that.
So we have some role, yes.
But you're not saying that Russia is somewhat. I can't think of the word today here, but nonetheless, that's our time. Yeah.
Well, thanks.
From Connecticut Public Radio, this is The Wheelhouse. I'm Frankie Graziano. Benjamin Wesley, great speaking with you today on the show.
All right, thank you.
We now have to take a quick break, but when we return, we'll be joined by Ebong Udama, senior reporter for WSHU. We'll also be joined by Andy Bly, reporter with the Greenwich Time. Ebong and Andy will help us analyze what we just heard from all three candidates for Connecticut's 4th Congressional District. If you have a question about what you just heard, join the conversation, 888-720-9677, 888-720-9677. Also want to let you know that we're tracking early voting across Connecticut at Connecticut Public. First time that state residents are doing it in person before a presidential election. Last week, my colleague Kat Shen, the host of Where We Live, spoke with poll workers and the Connecticut Secretary of State to talk about how towns are getting ready for 15 days of early voting. Find that conversation at ctpublic.org/where we live. Right now, you're listening to The Wheelhouse.
Thanks for listening to Connecticut Public Radio.
Support comes from the Webb Dean Stevens Museum, presenting Common Ground in a Fractured Nation, an all-day political symposium on November 2nd. Join in lively discussions about the past and future of American democracy. WDSmuseum.org.
Donald Trump has politicized the profound pain of grieving parents.
It's an execution, no longer abortion, because the baby is born, is okay.
That's a mischaracterization of what's known as perinatal hospice. We'll hear the truth about why it's sometimes needed and the care families receive. That's on the next On Point.
Listen this morning at 10. Support for arts and culture reporting on Connecticut Public Radio comes from Hartford Stage and Blythewald Mansions, Gardens, and Arboretum. Listen for reports on Morning Edition and All Things Considered.
Recognized for exceptional storytelling and visuals. Watch outstanding shows on demand and listen to local and regional reporting and award-winning podcasts anytime, anywhere. See what all the hype is about. Stream today at ctpublic.org/awards.
Support comes from Wesleyan University, presenting Black Voices and Visionaries in Cinema, a seminar exploring Black storytelling in film. Keynote talks by award-winning filmmakers Charles Burnett and Shaka King. Register at wesleyan.edu.
This is The Wheelhouse from Connecticut Public Radio. I'm Frankie Graziano. This hour, we've been talking to candidates for Connecticut's 4th Congressional District. 4th District encompasses most of Fairfield County, some of New Haven County. Now we're breaking down some of what we heard from the three candidates: Democrat Jim Himes, Republican Michael Goldstein, and Independent candidate Benjamin Wesley. With me now, Andy Bly, a reporter from the Greenwich Time and Hearst Connecticut Media Group. Andy, so excited to have you up here.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Thank you for braving all that Fairfield County traffic has to offer to get up here.
It's a real scary for Greenwich reporter to leave Fairfield County, but I braved it. Yes, I made it.
You made it here. I have to say that I'm happy to see you. And a good friend of mine joining us remotely today, Ebong Udoma, senior political reporter for SHU. Ebong, great to have you on today.
Great to see you again, Frankie.
Great to see you. I love your Zoom setup, too.
Nice to see you.
You got a question about what you heard from the candidates? Join the conversation. Maybe you want me to clean up my act after I had trouble speaking at the end of the last interview. Give us a call, 888-720-9677. Andy, we spoke with each of the candidates about one major issue in the 4th Congressional District: economic disparities, something you have to address, obviously, when you're talking about Fairfield County. Do you think they were able to address it? Do you think that they were able to effectively at least identify how the federal government might be able to help?
Yeah, I think that's a big challenge, right? Because as Representative Himes pointed out, some of the zoning issues are decided locally. The school decisions are decided locally. So obviously people in Congress have the power of their office to communicate with local officials and to, go on the media and talk about things. But as far as specific legislating or decision making, they don't have all of those authorities. And the 4th District, I believe, has 17 different towns and cities, different municipalities. So each one of those has kind of unique challenges. But as we saw, there's a lot of topics for Congress people and candidates to deal with. But I think all are sufficiently concerned, I'll say that.
And they have to kind of advocate, I guess, in this case. Ebong, did you hear anything from Michael Goldstein in this case that might have sounded helpful?
Not really, because as Andy just said, a lot of these are local issues. I know that as far as affordable housing was concerned, Goldstein talked about prefabs and stuff like that, but he never mentioned what the federal government's role would be in all this. And So, a lot of this and regulations are mostly local. So he talked about dealing with regulations. So I don't think this was an issue that they really had much to offer.
What about Benjamin Wesley? Let's ask him. Either of you guys hear anything from Benjamin on that issue, or on income inequality as well?
Mr. Wesley,
well,
you can go ahead, Ibong.
Yeah, well, basically, it seemed to be that Jim Himes stressed on improving the national economy. That as if you have a better economy, a lot of these issues would be you'd be in a better position to handle them. So that's the way that the federal government can play a role in this, as far as I see it. If the economy improves, it will be much easier to deal with a lot of these issues. Although in Fairfield County, an improving economy makes housing we have an even worse situation with housing the better the economy gets.
Go ahead, Andy.
Yeah, I agree. It's a challenging issue, and as Ibong's just said, it's like if a congressperson can move the needle nationally, everything will change nationally. The phrase I wrote in my little notebook back there was "rising tide lifts all boats." But yeah, I mean, as Representative Himes said, it's like it's really difficult right now without housing stock for teachers, firefighters, people just starting out in their careers. So it's a major challenge, and whoever wins this seat will play maybe some minor role, right? But this is a national issue, and they can do what they can to advocate. But I don't know. I don't know if they have the issue.
These gentlemen, particularly Congressman Himes, are more supportive of maybe seeing Work, Live, Ride or something like that go through in the local session this year.
That's what it sounded like to me, right? Building housing near transportation centers. So again, as we've said from the start of this, that's a local bill, local idea. And he can advocate for it and say he thinks a bill in the State House is a good idea, but he won't cast a vote on those.
There were several things I heard in the interviews. Apologize to the folks at home. We got to kind of rapid fire today because we have 3 candidates, and then we have to get to analysis. For this very point that I'm about to mention, a couple of different things we heard about both Ukraine and Russia, and then Israel and Hamas, that conflict as well, that I want to kind of go through. During Michael Goldstein's interview, he stated that 80% of casualties in Gaza are not civilians. They are Hamas or family members. Mr. Goldstein, pulling that number, it sounds like, from the Jewish News Syndicate, JNS, a right-leaning media organization that supports the Israeli government. At the end of September, Oxfam International stated that conservative figures show that more than 6,000 women, 11,000 children killed in Gaza by the Israeli military over the last 12 months. Anybody want to help me button that up or address that?
Well, that sounded kind of strange to me, but now that you've been able to source it, it is hard to know the exact figures because we are depending on Hamas for the casualty figures, and then on the other side, Israel discounts anything that comes from the Hamas Health. The Hamas Health Department, I think, has been the one giving us the figures from Gaza. So, but from just observing what's going on, it's almost impossible to have the amount of damage that there's been in destruction in Gaza without having a high casualty of civilians.
I don't know where those numbers came from per se, but I think Wesley brings an interesting component into this discussion, right? He's just very clearly like, war is bad. We should not be funding these in any capacity, whether it's in Gaza or Ukraine. So I don't know those specific numbers. I've cited different numbers in my reporting. But yeah, I do think that's why Wesley, as an independent candidate, brings an interesting angle into this, because Dr. Goldstein and Mr. Himes are both supporters of Israel and thinks America should continue backing the government there. But Wesley has a different idea. So I don't know if Wesley has as much electoral probability of
juice. Yeah,
right,
does he have juice
right.
behind him?
But
Well,
yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, but basically, I think he's getting involved just to get into the conversation, to get his point of view across, more than trying to actually win the seat. And so he has a unique perspective, and he would like to have that aired. And I think the more discourse there is, the better.
It's a popular platform, though, Ebong, too, if you think about it, particularly maybe among ultra-conservatives or progressives as well. Kind of stay out of wars and take care of your business, maybe be more isolationist in that regard in terms of how you spend money.
And that has been a talking point for Trump. He's been the one who has been pushing for getting out of all international conflicts. Although I don't know. I thought one thing that was interesting that happened was that Goldstein actually embraced Donald Trump, which is not what is happening in the 5th Congressional District, where we had a hard time trying to get the Republican candidate there, George Logan, to mention Trump's name. So it's interesting that, and in the 4th Congressional District, it's actually skewing more Democratic these days than it used to.
That's a great point, Ebong. Andy, should you be distancing yourself right now if you're a candidate in the 4th Congressional District, particularly in the statewide races? I think Ryan Fazio very clearly, he's a Republican running in the 36th District, very clearly trying to distance himself from Donald Trump. Should Michael Goldstein be doing that?
I'm not going to say what he should or shouldn't do, right? But yeah, I've thought about State Senator Ryan Fazio as well, because he's taken a very different approach where he does not want to talk about national politics at all. And Dr. Goldstein, says he's a supporter of Trump just a few minutes ago. So I don't know how it's going to work electorally, right? The 4th Congressional District voted first for Hillary Clinton and then for Joe Biden by pretty wide margins. So I don't expect a large change where the district's going to suddenly flip to supporting Trump this 3rd time he's up at the top of the ballot. But yeah, I mean, obviously there are people who support Trump's message in the district. And Goldstein, I do appreciate as a reporter, right, to have someone be open and honest. So yes. I appreciate that.
Electability, though, is that like, so that's where I think I was getting to, guys. Mm-hmm. And does it hurt your chances in a polarized society if you're supportive of maybe the Trump wing of the party? Because then does that speak to maybe, Ebong, you can answer this as well, too, not being able to reach across the aisle, maybe digging in further?
I think, I'll
go ahead.
I'll briefly say, the campaign trail is one place. And then if you win a seat, people sometimes act differently. But yeah, I don't know.
But at least you know where he lies beforehand, right. I think yes, is the point. Whereas I think Ebong's trying to say that in the 5th District, you might not necessarily have that idea yet.
In some ways, the race it's an easier decision for voters because you know where Himes stands and you know where Dr. Goldstein
stands. Yeah. So I think it's another reason to look at this is that the 5th Congressional District has attracted national funding and the 4th Congressional District has not.
About 2 minutes left to go on this. You guys are doing a great job. I might take off for the next couple of minutes because you guys are doing a fantastic job here. But let's talk about the 3rd candidate here a little more. We had the occasion to have a 3rd candidate on for the first time, an independent getting involved in this race as compared to the other ones. So what'd you hear from Benjamin Wesley? Was he able to insert himself here and maybe be some kind of a factor in this race?
I think one thing I wanted to mention while I was in front of a microphone is it's really difficult to beat an incumbent. And that's true for Dr. Goldstein and even more so for Mr. Wesley. Obviously, he's on the show today, right? He's up on the same stage, so to speak. So he is communicating his message in that way. And, he's pressing Himes on his record. But yeah, it's going to be difficult for anyone to beat Himes this go around.
And you have to realize he's a Democrat, but he needs to get his point across. He needs to get into the conversation. And that's probably one of the reasons why he's decided to run.
I was having trouble articulating this earlier, but I was trying to wonder whether or not I was a little confused by his Ukraine stance. I was wondering if he was saying sort of that when he used the word unprovoked, if he was kind of saying that Ukraine was getting what it deserved. It didn't sound like he was saying that. He was saying, I think it sounds like that America has some role in this, and that we shouldn't be supporting this war, at least spending money on it, because we should be spending some more money at home. Do I have that right? At least is that where you think he was going?
There was more American involvement in what was going on in Ukraine than we were that we were led to believe. But if you remember, it was Joe Biden that was on Zelensky's case telling him that this was going to happen, and he didn't believe it until the last minute.
And now you have an authoritarian regime that they're dealing with, which is why, it's tough to hear some of the things that Benjamin Wesley is saying in that regard. But then again, a lot of people do feel similarly that we shouldn't be funding former wars. Foreign wars. What a conversation we had with Andy Bly and Ebong Udama after the big event that we had with 3 candidates in Connecticut's 4th District. Thank you, Ebong, for coming on the show.
Thank you, Frankie.
Want to see you again soon. Andy, so good to have you on the show. Thank you so much for coming up here.
Thank you for having me.
Appreciate it. You get a little fist bump. I'm that excited this morning. Coming up next week, we're going to hear from candidates for Connecticut's 2nd Congressional District, incumbent Democrat Joe Courtney and Republican opponent Mike France. And before we head out, a reminder to listeners, Connecticut Public has you covered for all you need to know about the 2024 election. We got a voter guide at connecticutpublic.org/election. My man Patrick Scahill put that together. Details about the candidates and the issues and how you can cast your ballot. ctpublic.org/election. You know we got you on election coverage. Stay tuned, just 2 weeks away. We're live on election night and the night after. Today's show produced by Chloe Wynn, edited by Robin Doyen-Aiken. Technical producer is the maestro Dylan Reyes. Joe Koss and Bradley O'Connor manage our live stream. Graphics today by Sam Hockaday. Thank you to Tess Terrible, Megan Boone, Meg Dalton, Meg Fitzgerald, and Julianne Veracci. Download The Wheelhouse anytime on your favorite podcast app. I'm Frankie Graziano. This is The Wheelhouse.